Hello and welcome to another episode of the Revisited series. In this episode, we'll cover grapes again. You'll start by looking over a review of the scientific literature regarding grape archaeology and DNA sequencing by Dr. Maria Rosa Guasch-jané. Let's get started. The cultivation and domestication of the grapevine appears to have occurred between 7000 and 4000 BC. The primary center of origin for the domesticated form of grapes remains largely unknown, and it's likely that secondary independent domestications took place in a complex, long-term and multi-locale process. Most of the evidence suggests that the primary source of domestication started in the Near East before spreading to adjacent regions such as Egypt and the lower Mesopotamia region. This is estimated to have occurred sometime between 3500 BC and 3000 BC. It's from these locations that they spread around the Mediterranean. However, there is evidence of secondary domestications in Sicily and in the Western Mediterranean. Questions regarding the nature of the domestication, on whether or not it was rapid or slow, and whether or not the domestication event was singular or multiple. There are two subspecies of Vitis vinifera, or common grape. The subspecies vinifera, which is the domesticated subspecies, and the subspecies sylvestris, which is the wild subspecies. Several mutations seem to have occurred during the process of selection using vegetative propagation versus sexual reproduction. The historical separation to subspecies was based on morphological differences, and based on all evidence, it is believed that the wild form is the ancestor of the domesticated form. Nonetheless, the methods of which domesticated forms diversified and spread throughout history remain poorly known. Based on current evidence, the earliest known fermented beverage was grapes, which makes sense since grapes only need to have their skins broken to begin the fermentation process, while the process of making alcohol from barley or oats is much more complex. There's various reliefs, mosaics, and paintings in the archaeological record that showcase evidence in regard to winemaking. There have also been found texts, specifically papyrus and other books regarding the manufacturing of wine, and artifacts such as wine jars, wine cups, and strainers, as well as remnants of wine scraps such as grape seeds, leftover berries, vine wood, and remnants of wine itself. It is also featured heavily in the Mediterranean world in religion. There are several wine gods, such as the Egyptian god Osiris, the Greek god Dionysus, and the Roman god Bacchus. Remnants of wine have also been found in dig sites that host houses, burials, winemaking installations, storage rooms, and even Mediterranean shipwrecks. The earliest evidence of winemaking was recently discovered in 2017 in two Neolithic dig sites of Georgia. One was based on pottery fragments from the dig site Shulveris Gora and Gadacheri Gora. These remnants were dated to around 6000 BC. Another more definitive piece of evidence was found in the pottery jars in the Haji Fres Tepe dig site in the Zagros mountain in northern Iran. These remnants were dated around 5400 BC. The earliest known evidence of winemaking was found in the Greek Neolithic village site of Dikli Tash, which dates around 4300 BC. The earliest known complete winery that was found dates around 4000 BC and was found in Armenia. This site contained wine jars, remnants of grape, and various other devices used to make wine. Prehistoric remnants of grapes that date around 11,000 BC have been found in Greece, although the latter does not provide any evidence of grape cultivation. Indeed, none of the finds suggest winemaking at all on their own. However, combined with the fact that DNA has been collected from the remnants of these grapes and are found to be similar enough to different types of grapes used to make raisins, wines, and dessert grapes in modern days, seems to suggest, in combination with the other evidence, that winemaking was being used, at least using proto-domesticated wild grapes. This is further combined with other evidence of winemaking, such as wine amphoras, which are two-handled jars that have inscriptions on how to process and harvest wine grapes in wine production. Other amphoras from different cultures across the Mediterranean have also been found with similar writings. Based on these writings, Phoenician and Greek trade networks seem to be the primary mode of distributing wine during that era. Various coins of both Greek and Rome depict Dionysus and Bacchus respectively as well. These pieces of evidence also suggest that winemaking was rapidly spread throughout the eras, and that winemaking is at least as old as the Phoenician Empire. Wine remained the main stock and trade of ancient Mediterranean peoples for quite some time, alongside bread and oil, especially in the ancient Greco-Roman empires. There's also a philosopher called Athenaeus who described a wine party that was annual, where wealthy men who enjoyed drinking wine hung around and talked philosophy. This took place in Nautocratis, a Greek city in the Nile Delta. This was depicted in a writing called Sophists at Dinner, and dates between the 2nd and 1st century BC. Wine drinking and wine-making scenes were also described at the House of Dionysus, a church dedicated to that Greco-Roman god. This dates to around 200 BC. Between the ages of 4 and 70 AD, the Roman agricultural writer Columella described the proper means of how to prune a grapevine. This indicates an unbroken chain in terms of grape cultivation within the Mediterranean region. Wine was also heavily utilized in Mesopotamian texts as a means of treating a great many ailments. These writings are found on Sumerian cuneiform tablets that date around 2000 BC, and Egyptian medical papyri, which date around 1800 BC. The latter is believed to be copied from earlier texts that are estimated to date back to 3000 BC. And it was known that the Greek physician Hippocrates of Kos, who lived between 460 and 370 BC, referenced these texts in his medicine. Wine culture in Egypt was likewise a big thing. In the ancient world, wine was a luxury drink that was mostly served to the royal family and nobility of that era, and was enjoyed in banquets with guests and music for entertainment. Common folk only had access to wine in annual religious celebrations. It was also used heavily in funerary rituals. This is based on documents that date back to around 3000 BC, during the early dynastic period of ancient Egypt. Large quantities of wine jars have likewise been found in royal tombs, providing evidence that these texts are accurate. Based on texts and archaeological remnants, it is likely that wine was first developed in Egypt in the Nile Delta before being expanded into the Nile Valley and Western Oasis. This is based on inscriptions on jars indicating the history of wine and indicating that wine mainly came from vineyards in eastern and western Nile Delta. Grapes have also featured heavily in Egyptian iconography and mythology. In Egyptian mythology, wine symbolized the blood of Osiris, the god of the underworld, who would periodically go through a series of deaths and resurrections. This god also obtained the title of Lord of Wine in the late Old Kingdom, which dates between 2575 BC and 2150 BC. Wine was also used heavily in Egyptian symbology within the Book of the Dead, which influenced the Christian Coptic iconography which exists within Egypt to this day. In Egyptian iconography, there are a long litany of scenes depicting wine-themed gods, wine offering rituals, funerary banquets that have been represented on wall paintings, reliefs, and stone reliefs, as well as wooden panels. All of the above have been found in early dynastic tombs, where carved in stone walls or wood reliefs. The earliest known wooden panel that depicts winemaking and wine offering is dated to the 3rd dynasty, around 2650 BC. There's also liturgies in pyramid texts carved into inner walls that reference wine in one form or another, such as the burial chamber of King Unas, which dates around 2325 BC, and several tombs that date between 2575 and 2150 BC. They mention 3 different types of wine, distributed to deceased kings during rituals. These are called Buto wine, Marriott wine, and Plesium wine. It was said that this would allow the king to rise into the heavens and into the afterlife. This remained in play until ancient Rome came into vogue. It was also used heavily in various coronation ceremonies and other occasions such as the Royal Jubilee and various festivals. Now on to the DNA of these remnant grapes. The remnants of wine grapes have been dug up, and these remnants still had bits and bobs of DNA hanging around in it that could be analyzed. And various researchers throughout the years, especially in the late 2000s up to including the 2010s, have studied the preservation of this DNA, how it happened, and done DNA comparisons. Since the process of extracting DNA is destructive, they often use remnants of skin, teeth, and bone samples to limit the amount of damage that can happen. Indeed, this method has been used to find out genetic information regarding recently extinct species, using remnants of feces, eggshells, and of course plant material. This DNA can be actually fossilized and still read, although it's no longer functional. Charred seeds hold this echo of DNA called archaeodNA very well. This imprint of DNA can still be read, although it's no longer functional as DNA. The first known study into DNA analysis of wheat occurred in 2016, followed by other researchers who also did it around the same time using barley and grapevines as well, using pollen remnants and other plant fossils from lake sediment. Most of these studies are from 2016, although one is from 2017. One instance in the case of wheat showcased that this seed had a hexaploid genome like most modern wheats, although physiologically wise, it was a lot different than our modern wheats, indicating that this is a transitional form between wild and domesticated wheat. DNA tests of grape remnants have found something unique. Although they can be still recognized as domesticated grapes, they are far more genetically divergent than modern grapes are, indicating that our modern germplasm has declined in terms of genetic diversity, has declined since the first domestication period. Although the studies are limited right now, it's estimated that using this method, it is likely that one could figure out the different methods of domestication, the various integressions of wild populations of wine grapes, and the origins and histories of different cultivars of grape, both wine grape and otherwise, can be elucidated. One early study indeed showed that most archaeological seeds were related to wine grapes from Western Europe, and the wild accessions of grape are mostly associated with Central and Western European vines. This showcases that the range of wild grapes was far larger than it is now. Well, that about covers everything. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching this video. If you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe to me on BitChute for a greater variety of content, 4 videos a week. And thank you to all my subscribers on both platforms. I appreciate it.